Vamos a empezar. Can I invite everybody to have a seat? We're going to get started. And please be not shy. You can sit toward the front. Well, thank you for being with us this morning. My name is Arturo Vargas. I'm the Executive Director of NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, and the NALEO Educational Fund. The NALEO Educational Fund is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose mission is to increase the participation of Latinos in American civic life. NALEO is a national membership organization of Latino public servants and their supporters. Our members come from all political backgrounds, from all national origin backgrounds from throughout the country. And what's very special for us this year is that we are celebrating NALEO's 40th anniversary. It was 4 decades ago this summer that Congressman Edward R. Roybal, the late congressman, convened the first meeting of his colleagues to establish a national network of Latino elected and appointed officials to advance Latino political engagement in the American democracy. And I think if Mr. Roybal were here today, he would have be impressed with where the community has come in the 40 years since the establishment of NALEO. We will be celebrating our anniversary all year long. We began honoring our past at the NALEO Roybal Gala in Washington, D.C., where we honored Secretary Henry Cisneros. Over the summer at the NALEO 33rd Annual Conference, we engaged the president, talked about the Latino vote as we will today. And in the fall, in November, we will hold our 11th NALEO Institute for Newly Elected Officials, where we expect to convene up to 75 brand new city council members, school board members, and state legislators for what we consider to be our boot camp for newly elected officials to get them off on the right foot. And it's our way of celebrating the future, because there is much more yet to be done in terms of Latino political engagement. I'd like to also thank Telemundo Network's Yo Decido multi-platform news coverage, which is making this event possible. And finally, I'd also like to thank my colleagues who worked very hard to make this event possible. So the staff at the NALEO Educational Fund, my appreciation to all the work that you're all doing. So what we're going to do today first is I'm going to lay out some data about the Latino vote, some demographics, and then we're going to turn to a panel discussion about what all this means as we are moving towards November. As we talk about Latino vote, one of the things to keep in mind is that what really is driving the increase of the number of Latino voters is simply the increase of our population. Earlier this decade, Latinos became the nation's second largest population group, second only to non-Hispanic whites. And that population will continue to increase. Today, 17% of all Americans are of Latino background, and that population and that segment will only continue to grow every single year. There are now 55 million Latinos in the United States. What's, I think, even more a signal about the future is not that we are 17% of the U.S. population, but nearly 25% of all America's youth. In fact, millennials are projected to be nearly half of the Latino electorate. So whenever we talk about America's young people, America's youth, American millennials, really that has become synonymous with American Latinos. And we have become overwhelmingly a U.S. citizen population. So if there's nothing else to take away from this morning's discussion, it's two things. One is Latinos are a large and growing segment of the U.S. population, the U.S. electorate. They're very young and primarily U.S. citizens. In fact, 2/3 of U.S. citizens of Latinos are native-born, and 9 out of 10 of U.S. Latino youth are U.S. born. So whereas in previous decades, immigration was driving the growth of the Latino population, what drives the growth today is natural increase, and that's births over deaths. Our projections are that come November, there will be 27.3 million Latinos eligible to vote in the November election. Doesn't mean they're all registered. What that means is there'll be 27.3 million Latino U.S. citizen adults. One of the things, though, to really study is what is the component of the increase of the Latino electorate. 4 years ago, there were 23.3 million Latinos eligible to vote. So that's a 4 million person increase in the electorate in just 4 years. Where does that increase come from? Well, 3.2 million of those new potential voters are simply young Latinos who have turned 18 between 2012 and 2016. 1.2 million of them are Latinos who have become U.S. citizens through the naturalization process. It means they're immigrants who have sworn allegiance to this country, become U.S. citizens. 130,000 of those new potential Latino voters are Puerto Ricans who have moved from the island to the mainland over the past 4 years. And then when you take into account the decrease through to deaths of over about 500,000 Latinos in that period of time, you have that increase of 4 million. Again, what's driving the growth is young people turning 18 years of age. This chart shows the trajectory of the Latino electorate in presidential elections. We'll see that from 1988, when there were only 3.7 million Latino voters, I think we all remember these milestone elections, to 11.2 million in 2012. We'll see that there's a steady and consistent increase in the number of Latinos who vote in presidential election cycles. And it trails very closely to the number of Latinos who are registered to vote. The gap we see, and this is a gap that we're very concerned about at NALEO, is between the number of Latinos who do vote and the number of Latinos who can vote. And that is the challenge that we have laid before ourselves at NALEO about how do we ensure that Latino electoral performance mirrors that of the rest of the U.S. population. But one of the things to keep in mind about these new voters who are entering the electorate, that 1.5 million naturalized citizens, they are much more likely to vote than U.S.-born citizens. And as this chart shows, consistently, naturalized Latino U.S. citizens outperform native-born citizens in elections. That is not true for other immigrant groups. It's not true for the Asian community. It's not true for the European community. It is true for the Latino community. Latino immigrants who become U.S. citizens outperform their native-born counterparts. So that's a segment that we continue to study very closely. So as we look towards November, our projections are that 13.1 million Latinos will vote in this election cycle. And we arrived at this number using statistical modeling that takes into account the trends of the previous 4 presidential election cycles. We use data from the Census Bureau to determine this. It doesn't take into account the potential increase or decrease in Latino turnout that could result from the growth in Latino naturalizations. And we know that, again, naturalized citizens are driving a good chunk of the increase of Latino voters. We consider this the floor, that at minimum 13.1 million Latinos will exercise their right to vote come November. And we will be doing everything we can at NALEO, working with our sister organizations and the National Latino Civic Engagement Table to make sure that we surpass this number come November. And in fact, later this afternoon, there will be a discussion by the members of the National Latino Civic Engagement Table about efforts being made to turn Latinos voters out in November. In terms of the distribution of the vote by state, we know that there has been significant increases of the electorate in the states where Latinos are most heavily concentrated. This chart shows the number of Latino voters projected to vote in Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, and Texas. Just taking into account the 3 states of California, New York, and Texas, that is over 53% of all the voters in the country who are Latinos live in just 3 states. So one of the things that we're most interested in seeing from both campaigns is a 50-state strategy. Not a strategy that only focuses on a handful of battleground states, but a strategy that reaches Latinos in every single state. Because if a campaign ignores Texas, if a campaign ignores California or New York, you're ignoring more than half of all the Latino voters in the country. Some of the factors that may affect Latino voting performance in 2016 include changes in the Voting Rights Act. This will be the first presidential election held in over 50 years without the full force of the Voting Rights Act, even though the Supreme Court itself acknowledged that discrimination still exists, leaving the door open to a fix to the Voting Rights Act. The decision by the Supreme Court 3 years ago invalidated an important element of the Voting Rights Act, which we believe is going to potentially prevent some Latinos from voting, and we're concerned about the impact some of the new laws that have been implemented that may restrict voting may have on Latinos. These are the states that have enacted different types of restrictive laws since 2012. Our biggest concern are the states of Arizona and Texas. We know that Arizona had quite a bit of a mess in its primaries when it made some changes to the number of polling locations. Those kinds of changes do matter when you have people waiting hours in the hot sun to vote. We want to make sure that everybody is able to exercise freely the right to vote. And what we're doing at NALEO is ensuring that people have access to information about their rights and responsibilities as voters. We run an evergreen hotline, which means it operates 12 months out of the year. As we get closer to elections, we increase our staffing and availability of our hotline. We believe that the best protected voter is a voter who's well-informed. If a person understands their rights and responsibilities and they know what to expect when they walk into the polling location, their rights can be best enforced in that way. So we're making available our hotline so that anybody can call, find out, one, what the registration requirements are in their states or their counties, if they're registered to vote, and on election day, also where the polling location is. We'll have that information available at our fingertips for anybody who is seeking that information. So that's the view of Latino voters, but it wouldn't be a full view of this election. We also didn't discuss the role of Latino candidates in this election. And already, again, in every single election cycle, Latinos have made history, and they did so again with the historic candidacies for the presidency of United States Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Both of them ran competitive, viable campaigns for the presidency, and more importantly, became household names. Household names where literally all of America knew that there were 2 Hispanics running for president of the United States in Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, and Senator Cruz making himself even more historic by becoming the first Latino to win a presidential primary or caucus. Of course, Marco Rubio also won some primaries, demonstrating that there's no going back. This is what we're going to expect to see now going forward. Just as we saw Bill Richardson launch a viable campaign in 2008, now we see Senators Cruz and Rubio in 2016. We expect even more in 2020, 2024, and going forward. In terms of what's happening around the country, we have a number of races where Latinos and Latinas are running for down-ballot races. So this isn't just about the White House. This is about the U.S. Senate. This is about Congress. This is about statewide offices, school boards, city councils. We know we have a competitive race in California to replace Barbara Boxer. Senator Rubio, of course, has decided to seek re-election in his seat. There's a competitive race in Nevada for the Senate race there to succeed Harry Reid. In terms of congressional seats, there are a number of Latinos running throughout the country for open seats or challenging incumbents. Later this fall, we will have another briefing that we will hold in Washington, D.C., well, we'll do our own projections about what we expect to see the increase of the number of Latinos serving in the U.S. House. Once all the primaries have been held, and once we're closer to the election, we'll see how viable all these candidates are. But this is just a listing of the current Latino candidates running for Congress around the country. We have a number of candidates running in California. Nevada has a competitive race in the Las Vegas area, where Ruben Cuen has won that primary on the Democratic side. There will certainly be at least a net gain of one out of New York in terms of Latino members of Congress, with State Senator Adriano Espiat having won a competitive Democratic primary to succeed Charlie Rangel in that congressional seat. There are currently 2 Hispanics in New York, a congressional delegation, and now after this election cycle, we expect there to be 3. Texas has 2 new faces, one new face, in Vicente Gonzalez running to succeed Ruben Hinojosa, and then former Congressman Pete Gallego is seeking his old seat, and probably the most competitive seat in the country, a seat that spans almost the entire U.S.-Mexico border in Texas, where he is challenging Congressman Hurd in a rematch of what was held 2 years ago. Florida, the thing that's great about NALEO is that we have friends on both sides of the aisle, and in the 9th District, both good friends of NALEO, Darren Soto and Wanda Rentas, are taking on each other in that race to represent Florida's 9th Congressional District. And again, in another competitive race in the Miami area, Carlos Curvelo is running for re-election, and Joe Garcia, who previously held that seat, is again seeking that seat, as is business owner Annette Tadeo. So it's going to be an interesting and competitive, exciting election cycle all over the country. There are a number of statewide races where Latinos are also seeking office, from Delaware to Indiana. Just another demonstration that Latinos are not just located in a handful of states. We are a 50-state community, and we have candidates in all 50 states, and one of the things we expect, again, from the campaigns is a 50-state strategy. And here we see some of the other candidates from Missouri, New Mexico, and Washington, where we have Latinos running for statewide office. So that's an overview of where we are in terms of Latinos as voters, the demographics, and the candidates around the country. I'd now like to invite up Lori Montenegro, who is the national correspondent for Noticiero Telemundo, to lead us in a discussion with my colleagues who will join me on a panel. I'll have her introduce them. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's just the second day of the convention, and I can tell you that I am wiped out. Arturo, thank you so much. It was a great presentation with a lot of information, and that's what we hope the discussion is going to surround our panelists, who are very knowledgeable, answering some of the questions that came up with the study and all the numbers that Arturo pointed out to us. I want to begin quickly by introducing former Governor of Puerto Rico, Luis Fortuño. If you come up to the stage, we have Ruth Guerra, Congressional Leadership Fund Deputy Communications Director, and Daniel Garza, the Libre Initiative Executive Director. Perfect. And the governor has just let us know that he does not have to rush out. We were hoping that he could stay, and he has pulled it off, so thank you very much. I'm going to start quickly and just give you all three. In television, it's 30 seconds. I need somebody with a stopwatch, please. And I will let Ruth go ahead. We'll start with the ladies first. Okay. And what do you want to start this discussion with? Give us 30 seconds of your thoughts.
I think discussing the Latino candidates that we have in the Republican Party is important. It's something that we saw on the presidential stage with Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, as we were discussing, as Arturo was pointing out, and I think that's something good. And I think the amount of Latinos coming out to vote in this election, as we also pointed out during the presentation, is something historic. And the millennial vote, making 44% of that. And what are the issues that are important to Latinos, and it's going to show that, poll after poll that we see, it's the economy, it's jobs, just like every other American. So,
Governor?
Well, I'd like to point out, in addition to what Ruth mentioned, how historic this primary season was in many ways. But we had two Latinos running for president, and they were pretty competitive and successful. We have the fact that we have a number of, couple governors that are Latinos as well, Susana Martinez and Brian Sandoval. And the fact that there is an intent to, and I will talk a little bit further about it, an intent to continue to elect people that represent our community better. More women, more Hispanics, more African Americans, at all levels, from the bottom up. That's a future of not just a party, in this case I'm a Republican, but the future of America, in the sense that, but to accomplish that, we have to go out and vote. And I must commend Arturo and NALEO what they're doing in terms of promoting participation across party lines. I believe that's a very powerful message, and it's a message of that should resonate all across the country, and hopefully a lot of people will heed that call.
I second what the governor is saying about the work that NALEO is doing has been incredibly valuable. We were on the outside looking in for decades as Latinos, and you're starting to see that we are now on the inside looking out. And Latinos are now a force to be reckoned with as elected officials, as candidates, but also as voters. And not only at the presidential level, but congressional races, Senate races, school boards and advisory boards and planning commissions. We are a force to be reckoned with. Having said that, ideas matter. Policies matter, and how they impact our Latino community. Are policies generating prosperity and wealth and an increase in productivity that, by the way, gets us jobs? Or are they generating more government dependency, inducing idleness, and as a result, actually increasing poverty? That discussion is an important one to have, and we should welcome that debate.
Thank you to all three. And so with that said, we're here at the Republican Convention in Cleveland. The Republican primary, needless to say, has been extraordinary. The playbook was basically just thrown out the window. But with respect to the Hispanic community, in doing my work on interviewing people, some have said that the tone of that campaign and some of the things that Donald Trump has said may have alienated the Hispanic vote. Has the Republican Party lost an opportunity to capture the Hispanic vote? Is it too late? And if not, what do they need to do ASAP?
If you want me to start, the Republican candidate for the presidency has not run an ideal race with respect to outreach to Latinos. It is not too late. I think he could begin an aggressive, all-out effort to court Latinos. And by courting, I mean to engage those that are already aligned on principles and ideas, and outreach to those that you need to persuade and win over. For far too long, the left has dominated the conversation with the Latino community, imposing their ideas, driving their ideas. That's not a criticism. That is a credit to the left. They understood the value of the Latino voter long before those on the right did, or the conservative side did. Now that they're seeing the numbers, now that they're seeing the results of what can happen when you court Latinos, like a Cory Gardner who got 45% of the Latino vote, all of a sudden Latinos matter. So I don't think it's too late. Right now, the left has defined Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I haven't seen him on Univision, on Telemundo, I haven't seen him on CNN Español making his case to the Latino community on how he is going to drive a positive agenda that's going to generate wealth and opportunities and more quality education for Latinos. He needs to do that and ramp it up fast.
You brought up 2 points and that I'm going to go back to, but Ruth, go ahead.
If I can just add a little bit, I think another opportunity that symbolizes why he may not be too late is if you look at Hillary Clinton's unfavorables and you look at how disliked and untrustworthy she is amongst all Americans. I think that provides another opportunity there because people simply just don't like her. Without
question, you're
Yeah, and so that gives Donald Trump another opportunity, let alone with the fact that everything that Dan said, but just because the other side is just, they simply just don't like her. So, and it includes Hispanics as well.
But Governor Fortuño, my question is, some say, are Hispanics to forget, and specifically, todos somos Latinos, and a lot of people believe that even though he has called out Mexicans and has used, the Mexican community, we all are Latinos. I mean, means, we see each other as a global community. So how do we forget? Some people say, how does the voter forget? How do we forget what he said? And then, you come back to me and say, but this is not what I meant.
No, those statements were unfortunate, and they should not have been made, period. As simple as that. Having said that, however, I believe what Danielle said is so important. This is about ideas, and I will add results. Just siding with one side of the political spectrum, does that make sense for our community? What have we been able to gain out of that? If there's one party that believes that they own us, is that positive for us? Certainly not. And where the rubber meets the road is at the state and local level. And at the state and local level, we are electing strong, valuable elected officials that are Latinos, that are principled conservatives, and that are showing the way as to where this country should head so that our kids have a better education, because as a parent of three, as a father of three, I care more about what my children's education is going to look like than about what was said last night, I'll be honest. And I care more about whether they will have a job opportunity than what will be said tonight. And that's the bottom line here. And, there's all these speeches, and some people say stuff that should not be said, and some people say things that sound beautiful, but the results are not there. And what we ought to do as a group is demand results. And that's why we all have to participate and vote.
Arturo, but to demand results, what exactly do the candidates have to do? I'm going to pose to you the question to the three. Then what do you view the Republicans need to do to capture the Hispanic vote, especially the presidential candidate?
Right, well, first, let me welcome a very special guest. We have His Excellency Carlos Sada, the Mexican ambassador to the United States. Thank you for joining us this morning. And what we want to see from the candidates, and frankly, both campaigns, is not to assume that Latinos will not vote for you because of your party affiliation, and not to assume that Latinos will vote for you because simply of your party affiliation. And I think of all the Republican candidates for the presidency, the one who understood that the most was George W. Bush. He achieved up to 44% of the Latino vote because he understood Latinos. And I think what many members of NALEO who belong to the Republican Party really admired that strategy and understood that the Republican Party can have a future Latino electorate within it if it proceeds with the kind of strategies that they saw President Bush do. So what I would like to see from the current campaigns is a 50-state strategy, as I said before. Don't just talk to the Latinos in Florida and Colorado and Nevada, but you got to talk to all of us and about our issues. We're not a single-issue constituency either. And the one thing that frustrates me is that every time a candidate gets up in front of a Latino audience, we only hear about one issue, about immigration. Yes, it's absolutely important. We need immigration reform. Our immigration system needs to be modernized. Undocumented immigrants are the most vulnerable of our population. But as you saw, 94% of our children are U.S. born. What do both candidates and campaigns, what is their vision for Latinos in America's future? That's what I want to hear.
The political narrative is so important in a candidate. In 2000, George W. Bush, and I served as a delegate in Philadelphia at the time, in 2000, you had Vicente Fernandez singing Sigo Siendo el Rey at the National Convention. That tells me I matter, that my culture matters, that there's a symbolism of inclusivity. Where is that? So it's not only, of course, policy for me holds primacy, but also the narrative. If your narrative includes me, then that tells me that I'm going to be included in your policy outcomes too, that I'm going to be considered as a Latino. And so the fact that, and I'll get back to the point that Governor Fortuño was making so eloquently, the fact that Obamacare has had a negative impact on Latinos matters. That Dodd-Frank is hindering opportunity in the private sector matters. That school choice should be afforded to Latino parents who have children in failed schools matters. That the role of government, that we reverse the centralization of power and money to politicians and bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., back to the people and the individuals so they have more of their money and more freedom to do business startups and launch businesses matters to us. That you want to impose federal mandates and increase the power of government over our lives matters. All these issues have to be considered. And if Donald Trump can drive that issue and tell me that my life is going to be better if I vote for him than if I vote for Hillary, matters. But when I don't see you on Univision or Telemundo or Cine en Español, or I don't see you courting Latinos at our Chamber of Commerce's, at NALEO, at where we're at, then that matters too.
So, you know what? You brought it up again. Ruth brought it up. Why is it that it seems that a lot of the conservative candidates, Republican candidates, do not want to engage with Hispanic media? What's the problem?
They think we're going to hurt them. I don't know. I'll let somebody else answer.
I think the language is a huge issue.
I wouldn't say that, though.
I will say some of them are there's been instances that they're like, well, I don't speak the language, so I don't know what's going to be said and what's going to be like the voiceover. So there's a trust factor there. And that trust needs to be built, and it needs to be built with, quite frankly, a lot of times when Republicans think about Spanish language media and Hispanic media, they think about Univision. And quite frankly, they think about Jorge Ramos. And that is not necessarily, that doesn't give a lot of Republicans trust that they're going to be treated fairly, that they're going to be able to talk about other issues other than immigration, like jobs and the economy and education. And they're like, should I invest time and effort and talk about my immigration stance, which I've already explained, or should I go and talk about jobs and jobs in the economy and education, which poll after poll says that it's the number one issue. So trust is a big issue.
Well, without getting into an argument, I have to say that Hispanic...
I want him in front of Jorge Ramos. I want him to prove his mettle in front of somebody who's going to maybe antagonize him a bit. Why should you stay away? Why should you resist that?
Well, I think those in both parties should not resist us. And I have to say, as somebody who has to call and ask for interviews all the time, it's a bit of a challenge, not only from Republicans, but from Democrats, that I don't think we get the time that we deserve. I mean, that our community, that the audience that we serve deserves.
And I don't.
It's a challenge, but I don't know if you wanted to jump in there real quick.
Yes, I was going to say it depends on the candidate, and Daniel Garza mentioned Cory Gardner, and he ran what I would say is a textbook campaign as to what you ought to be doing, not just running in a diverse state, but in America today.
But why is it that he gets it and others don't?
Well, because there are people that actually run better campaigns and people that run awful campaigns, and that's just the way it is. It's just,
and, yeah. He was at Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. He was at the churches. He was at colleges with Latino kids. His narrative was inclusive. He hired from the Latino community. He went to to areas of the city where there were Latinos. He connected, is what he did. He earned the vote of Latinos. He courted Latinos.
And their trust.
On the other side, and their trust. On the other side, you had Udall, who ran a campaign of war against women. And that's all he did, and took Latinos for granted like they didn't even matter, because they were already his territory. They were already in lockstep to vote for him, because 90% had voted for Michael Bennet. Think about that. 90% had voted for Michael Bennet, and 85% had voted for Barack Obama. Here comes Cory Gardner, does the hard work, and puts a little elbow grease into the effort, and gets 45% of the Latino vote.
Do any one of you even envision Donald Trump doing something like that?
We're not
Showing
seeing
up?
it. There's still time. If he can begin to connect with Latinos and again drive that positive agenda, that aspirational message.
There was an announcement yesterday. We'll see what that entails. But there was an announcement yesterday that right after the convention, Donald Trump and the party chairman Reince Priebus are going to do they were going to travel around the Hispanic communities around the country in a concerted effort. That was announced yesterday. I don't know what that entails. I don't know if it just means that they go to 1 or 2 meetings and that's it. I don't know if it includes interviews with the press or not. I'm really not, I don't understand exactly what it means. But at least there was an announcement yesterday that they have an intention of doing that.
I want to move it along a little bit.
And by the way, if I may, sorry to interrupt, Reince Priebus gets it. He does. He has put boots on the ground in the communities where and when there is a Hispanic community, there's our Hispanics and they're connecting. And actually, a lot of what we have seen in terms of it's more than outreach, is inclusion, has been because Reince Priebus, as chairman of the party, gets it. Gets it more than previous Republican chairs and previous Democratic chairs as well, by the way. So you don't have to be Democrat or Republican to get it. You must simply, have an open mind and understand that the fabric of America is diverse, and that's what makes us strong.
I want to talk about something that Arturo brought up, and it's very important, and it's about the Latino millennials. Basically, it seems like they are driving a lot of changes, not only in politics, but in the economy and technology, future jobs, education. With regards to them and the Republican Party, what do you see their role there? Do you see them as a vote that will be able to capture? Because you say, look, it's not just about immigration. It is about the economy. And these millennials are the people who have been born here and raised here, and sometimes are the children of second generation.
So our role at the Libre Initiative is to inform and educate Latinos about the merits of the free market and the perils of a massive federal government. And in doing that, we have found that the toughest nut to crack is young Latino millennials because they're fresh out of college, they're energetic, there's no silver bullet to communicate to them. They're very techie, and I'm not. So we have hired a ton of millennials to do the work for us because I don't speak for the millennial generation, and I don't presume to get them. And the Latino community is so diverse in age, gender, social level, educational level, economic level, nationality, todo, generational. So sometimes the messenger matters as much as the message, and that people can relate to somebody, and because that somebody can sympathize with their experiences. My American experience is very different from a Cuban American in Miami, very different from a Puerto Rican in New York, and I don't pretend that we're all the same. So when I say that there's no silver bullet, that means that you need to communicate through digital, through television, through radio, through print. You need to be at the colleges, at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, at churches. Wherever they're at is where you need to go and drive that messaging. Look, and I know I've gone on too long, but let me just say something really quick. Nevada, for example, 2.8 million people. 800,000 of them are Latinos. Of that, I think 39% are registered to vote. 200,000 are going to be voting. We are 28% of the population in Nevada, but only 16% of the voting public. So obviously the left sees that as, well, if we register more, then that means more Latino voters. We see it as, if we educate and inform more, then we turn out the folks who are going to vote aligned with the policies. So there's this huge disparity, and I think a lot has to do with because we're so young. Look, California and Texas are already decided, red and blue, no engagement at all. On top of that, we're so young that we have so low turnout, though. I think it's like 38% or somewhere around there, under 40% is the turnout for registered voters.
No, for registered voters, it tracks very closely to non-Latino performance. About 60 to 65, even up to 70% of registered voters.
Oh, I'm sorry. So overall,
But all U.S.
eligible voters.
all U.S. Latino citizen adults, we hover about a 50% turnout rate, and that's our challenge.
Well, and the fact that we're so young, I think, also is our virtue, but sometimes it also hurts us in the polls.
So Ruth, you're out there trying to get Latinos to come in and participate not only at the voting booth, but actually running for office. Do you see more Latino millennials doing that?
I mean, it's a challenge, I think, and whether it's women and whether it's millennials, whether it's Hispanics.
And what is the challenge?
For women, typically, the challenge is that they need to be asked, and a lot of times they're not asked, which is different than men. Men typically say they want to run, and they do it, and women, it's different. But certainly, we need more, and there's a great organization, RSLC, the Future Majority Project, that focuses on that with that Governor Fortunio can speak to, and the tremendous hard work that they've been doing at the state level, and to get more women, to get more minorities, Hispanics to run for office, and have had tremendous success in 2014. And just quickly we were talking about Senator Cory Gardner, another Coloradan that has done a phenomenal job engaging the Hispanic community is Congressman Mike Kaufman, who in fact speaks fluent Spanish to engage more with his community. And while you don't necessarily need to speak Spanish to engage with Hispanics, and we all know that, obviously there's that comfort level of like, you care, you went as far as to learn Spanish and speak to me. And he held a debate when he was running for Congress in Spanish on his local Univision station. So that shows the efforts and how far some candidates will go to engage the community as far as to learn Spanish and keep up with it so they can have that real relationship with them.
Governor,
If I may add to what Ruth just referred to, the Future Majority Project, and Neri Martinez is here, and these are my heroes as to what they're doing out there. In the 2013-14 cycle, through the Future Majority Project, 240 new, diverse candidates were identified and ran for office and were supported by this effort. 240. In this cycle, it's going to be 500. Wow. So, excuse me, that means is that there'll be more women, more Hispanics. It also means more African Americans and more Asian Americans. But many of them are women and Hispanics that will be at different positions at the local level. They'll be elected. These are the future mayors of major cities, governors, members of Congress, senators, and some of them end up running for president. And we saw two of those running on it was both of them on the Republican side, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, and they had started in lower positions. So this is very important because that's how you empower a community from the bottom up. Anything that you impose from the top down will not work. And that's why I'm so enthused about that effort. And these are real numbers, real people. I've met many of them. Some of them have been elected and actually are aspiring for higher office, of our aspired. If I may mention, for example, we have Carlos Lopez Cantera, Florida's lieutenant governor. John Sanchez, New Mexico's lieutenant governor. Carlos Cascos, Texas Secretary of State, just to mention a few. So these are real people. These are leaders at the state level, and we'll hear more about them. And I believe, at least on the right, this is the most important effort that's being made to truly be inclusive and empower our community.
So I'm going to move the program around just a little bit because the time is getting away from us. I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm going to ask you in the audience who do want to ask questions, start thinking about that, because after they answer what I'm going to ask now, it'll be your turn. One of the things that has bothered me over the years, I keep hearing about this sleeping giant has woken up. And there's just something that I don't understand. And there, to me, is just mind-boggling. 27 plus, you said now, eligible to vote. But yet we only expect 13.1 to actually go and vote. Why? ¿Qué pasa? ¿Por qué no vamos a votar? Why aren't we going to vote? I don't understand.
Well, Latino voters aren't dumb. And if you're ignored and no one comes and asks you for your vote and no one talks to you about your issues, you're not going to feel like the political process works for you. And that's exactly what the American political system has done to Latinos. It has ignored Latino voters. From all we know about the importance, just look right now at the landscape of how this campaign is shaping up between now and November. All the conversation ends up being about 3 states where Latinos will make a difference: Florida, Colorado, and Nevada. What about the Latinos in California? 3.8 million are expected to vote there. What about the Latinos in Texas? 2 million are expected to vote there. What about the million Latinos in New York who are expected to vote? Unless people go out and actually engage them, people get the message, you don't care about what I think. And that's what the system has been doing cycle after cycle after cycle. And we have to break that cycle.
Let me turn that around a minute, though. Don't we have a responsibility? Si no queremos que nos respeten, don't we have the responsibility to step up and go and vote?
Absolutely.
Dan, whoever wants to jump in there?
I agree 100%. There was a study done by Latino Decisions, who is now contracted by the Hillary campaign. But anyways, leftist polling firm. They put out some good information, and it was only 25% of Latinos in Texas had been outreached to by a political party or by a organization that is interested in policy. 25%, and that's mostly because you're not going to see the presidential candidates in Texas unless they're there for fundraising. They don't do the outreach. They don't do the engagement in California either. California is blue, Texas is red. Almost half of Latinos live in those 2 states. Boom, that already knocks a lot of us out. We're so young. We're 27 years median age. The rest of the country is 37, much older than we are. Más serios. They care more maybe about policy. I'm not saying that we're young and indifferent to politics, but I can tell you from personal experience, I was 23 and I didn't know the difference between a Republican or a Democrat. Honestamente. My friends never talked about politics. My parents, menos. They had to put food on the table. So it was one of these things where unless you had engagement, but like Arturo is saying, from the parties or from somebody who was interested in this, you kind of didn't pay attention. Now it's kind of hard to ignore because of social media. Now we can reach them. Now we can get at them through Telemundo.
Thank you.
But yes, it's our responsibility, which is why we've stepped up. We're doing the engagement. Of course, we get hit by the left because how dare you engage Latinos? Well, I don't need your permission to do it, and I'm not going to apologize for it. We believe in certain ideas and a certain agenda, and con su permiso o sin su permiso, we're going to drive the message. And so we're proud of the work that we're doing.
And give the Democrats a run for their money. That's what I want to
Well, the left. We're nonpartisan.
Give the left a run for their money.
Okay, we'll leave that there. Question, please. Anybody has? Go right ahead.
Just a question.
If you could stand up and just identify yourself so they'll know.
I just have a question for Governor Fortuna, just because the focus on the Sunshine State.
Sure.
And as a fellow Boricua.
Yeah.
In terms of what's your sense on the ground right now in Florida when it comes to the Puerto Rican vote, especially since, in the last 5 or, in your administration and in the current administration, there's been a mass exodus. And I don't think the country really understands that voter. And you as a former leader of our home island, what's your sense? Why people are leaving, going to Florida, and what are they thinking about in terms of the general election? I know they, what are they? Sure. Are they going to make a difference?
It's going to vary. Those that moved, to Florida 10 years ago are different from the ones that moved 2 years ago. The ones that moved 2 years ago, perhaps they still don't have roots there, and in the last 2 years, the flow has tripled. So it has accelerated dramatically. So perhaps those that moved more recently are still looking back, and they're not, they may not be as engaged. But those that moved 10 years ago their kids are going to school there. They may have a business there, so they should care about what's happening. And my belief is that those will be more engaged and more active, as opposed to those that moved in, in the last 2 or 3 years. Although that's a big chunk of people, as I mentioned, that has tripled in the last 2 or 3 years, as opposed to what was before. The previous 10 or 15 years, there was a constant flow, but it has accelerated. So I would target, if I were doing any kind of political activities there, I would target those that have been there for the longer period of time because they have more at stake. I believe also with the court decision that the redistricting of many of the congressional seats, making many of those more competitive, we'll see a lot more outreach or inclusion because it's what used to be a +5, +7, +9 district. Now it's pretty +1, +2 district. So it's a lot going one way or another. So it's going to be a lot more competitive, and every vote will count. And on top of all of that, this time around, it may be. We'll see what happens with the rhetoric, but it may be that some voters will turn out in greater numbers because of what's being said at the presidential level. It may not happen, but it may happen.
If I could just add really quick, we have done some outreach on the island, and we've had folks who have landed in Orlando and went straight to our office because of the services and the kind of transitional help that we provide. But I think what would also be great on top of that in the Orlando area, especially with the Puerto Rican community, is for us to spread our services and our outreach, but also to see like a group like Ruben Barales' Grow Elect grow in throughout the Orlando area that grooms and develops young leaders to run for offices who are conservative. And Nettie, of course, in the work that she's doing to expand that work. Mario Lopez, who runs the Hispanic Leadership Fund, also to expand the work that they're doing and driving their ideas and their policies. Just in lockstep, with these kind of free market principles and conservative ideas that are going to lift Latinos and make their lives better once they arrive in the mainland.
A lot of the changes that have been made to certain voter laws or allowing voters or the rules that guide them to vote in each state have come from states where there are Republican governors, or that the House of Representatives or the Senate is in control of Republicans. Amongst you three, is there any concern? We know that NALEO is concerned, and a lot of other Hispanic organizations are very concerned about obstacles that could be placed for minority voters when they go to the polls, and it could even discourage them from going to the polls. If you have any concern, what would that be?
If I may, what we should be encouraging is registering people. Once you're registered, you're more likely to vote. If you're not registered, it's more difficult, and this is statistically proven. I don't have a problem, and I know I differ with NALEO on this one. I don't have a problem with voter ID. In Puerto Rico, you are required to have a voter ID, and participation rates are above 70%. What's key is getting people registered to vote. Voter ID, guarantees that, that no one votes twice, or that only those that are supposed to vote are voting. But registering should be made easy, accessible. It should be 24/7. It should be one thing what we're doing in Puerto Rico is that we were going to high schools, and if you are in high school, we will register you. That makes so much sense. Many states do. Actually, if you get your driver's license when you turn 16, you get to register to vote. We should make it easy for people to register, and I would say that that's where we should focus more than once you're registered. The other item, of course, is once you on the polling places, you should not be standing in line for 4 hours. It makes no sense, and that has a lot to do with the fact that at times people don't care much about investing in the electoral process, and since this is run locally, we should also look at that and make sure that people have full access to vote and don't stand in line for 4 hours.
I would say I believe strongly in the integrity and the sanctity of the vote. One person, one vote. So I agree with the governor that I don't have
But
so
let
much
me
issues.
interrupt you there because in my reporting I have
Did I
found.
throw out a talking point that you
Yeah,
didn't like?
well, but the thing is, in my reporting, and I think I don't want to speak for any of the journalists here, but I haven't found that there has been this overwhelming fraud in the states
so we
where
don't wanna
you
get
know.
into that point, right?
But what? But
You don't want to be too lax, but you don't want to be too severe.
nothing has
yeah.
happened. You know what I'm saying? I don't find the evidence. I haven't found evidence that there has been an overwhelming
Well, I come from
fraud.
South Texas in the Rio Grande Valley.
Okay.
It's happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Okay, but that's one place.
Yeah.
That's not in a lot of the
There's
states
been
where they have
shenanigans with
tried.
the voting
all of South Texas.
through South. Yeah, it's corruption is
Okay,
rampant.
ese Texas.
Second Modi and saying that in 25 years of all of my reporting, I have never found that.
Come on down to the Rio Grande Valley.
I'm sorry?
Come on down to the Rio Grande Valley.
But Modi is
Politiqueras.
setting a national conversation based on one place in the Rio Grande Valley and setting a tone and a narrative that says that Latinos.
Well, you asked me for an example. I'm throwing out an example.
The narrative that Latinos are capable or desiring to want to take.
I guess my argument.
Just finish.
No.
When Latinos and the whole notion being the narrative out there that we're undocumented but that we're going to try to vote anyway, in a context in which you're undocumented and what you are doing is trying to hide yourself from every possible authority, it's a narrative that I appreciate Nori saying as a journalist in all of our years, you know, we're not that old or anything like that, but in all of our years we've never encountered.
No, I simply disagree that requiring an ID, different forms of ID, for you to vote is somehow so hindering, so obstructive, that we are impairing the vote of minority Latinos. Please, that's an insult. We're very capable, we're smart, we're intelligent. We can get an ID and go and vote. But we have to register.
To get on a plane, you need an ID. To get on a train, you need an ID.
Arturo wants.
You know.
Arturo's gonna jump in. I could see it. He was already. I could see him twitching already.
Yeah.
Our position at NALEO is that the right to vote is sacrosanct. We should all make sure every adult U.S. citizen has free access to the ballot. If we raise the bar about what else you need to vote, then we should question that. We should be, as the governor said, making voting more accessible, not more restrictive. So when anybody places another obstacle, let's question it about what is its purpose, and does that obstacle affect one group disproportionately than another? And that's our position at NALEO about some of these laws that have been implemented.
Yeah, I
Ruth,
think
you're very quiet.
Well, I think they're doing a really good job in covering this issue. But because in my experience, when I was at the RNC, we're actually out there registering folks to vote and registering Hispanics. And so I saw that. So being accused as Republicans try to suppress the vote when you have folks on the ground registering voters, it doesn't necessarily make sense because you have personnel out there full-time being paid to register Latinos so they can come out and vote. So it's...
I think a balanced approach to this is what I would recommend. We ought to be aggressive in registering people and making it easy to vote. We should be also very careful in protecting the sanctity of each vote so that people vote once. And it's not a Latino issue or African American issue or or women issue or youth. We should do both. What I would be against is doing only one but not the other. And I'm not going to lie here. There are some states where they only do one and not the other. If you don't promote registering and make it easier, but you require an ID, I don't think that's a balanced approach. But if you don't require an ID and it's a free for all, and let's be real, sometimes it has been crazy. At times, and we have been embarrassed. Look at the primary process in Nevada. That was embarrassing for both parties. So we ought to be very careful and guarantee that actually each vote matters. And you know why people are so mad out there and why Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders were so actually successful? Partly because they believe that the system is rigged. A lot of people believe the system is rigged, and actually it's run by career politicians. And if, Nevada is just an example of why some people are turned off by this process. So we ought to make it very easy and accessible, but guarantee the sanctity of the process as well, I would say.
Let me be quick to add also that we spend a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of volunteer staff and time in helping people become citizens. Thousands have become citizens through our workshops and the services that we provide, because we want as many Latinos to be voting, to be flexing their muscle. And sometimes that goes against the interest of the policy outcomes that we desire. But it is sacrosanct. The vote should be given to everybody. But I agree with the governor. There has to be a balance. There has to be, that we can't be too lax, but we can't be too severe either. But do everything we can to get as many Latino voters voting. And I think sometimes maybe we feel, look, you talked about an over 70% participation rate in the vote in Puerto Rico. When Puerto Ricans come to Florida, what's the...
I know. And let me tell you, and in Puerto Rico, it's worse. You must get a voter ID that only the Electoral Commission issues. So it's not your driver's license, which makes no sense, by the way. It should be a lot easier. Let me close with this, if I may. Iris recognition technology is making tremendous breakthroughs. And it actually guarantees that it's a tremendous anti-fraud technology.
You are.
Okay, yeah. I dream with the time when people from their own homes using iris recognition technology will be able to vote and not even have, to stand in line. And so I dream, because I want, the higher the participation, the better, and the stronger our democracy. But until that technology is in place, or any other technology, we have to be we have to guarantee that the sanctity of that process.
Señor Embajador.
I'll change a little bit gears and want to refer to the relationship that exists between the United States and Mexico. Mexico is the second largest trading partner of the United States. Canada is number one. We have developed a very integrated economies. For each dollar that it is exported from Mexico to the United States, 40% is U.S. content. It is the only case in the world. If you take another country like China, it is only 4%. Even with Canada, it is less than Mexico. Yesterday, I was in a panel with, during a conference with Mr. Chris Christie. I can mention this because I tweeted, and I asked the same question. What do you think about the relationship between Mexico and the United States? Because he visited Mexico like two years ago. And his response was, there is no other more important relation for the United States than Canada and Mexico. And yet, we are the ones that keep being bashed every single day. On the other hand, we continue being also, I ask every single day, what about the wall? Is going Mexico to pay for it? So what is your take on that? Because if you are the best partner, if you are generating 6 million jobs in the United States because of the exports from the United States to Mexico and Canada, 9 million jobs from Canada, from U.S. export to Canada. So what is your opinion on that? Because I do not hear any positive things about it. And of course, when you are insulted, there is a reaction. And we Mexicans have been insulted. And the wall is a division, not only division between the United States and Mexico, it's a division between the United States and the rest of Latin America. So what is the message? How are you going to change that rhetoric? Because we are sensitive also. You can imagine that, right? And we are being very competitive as a region. We have to figure out that by the integration, having the integration of the three of us, the three countries, we are competing against the rest of the world. We are not fighting against Canada or against the United States. We are being very productive, and that's why we are attracting a lot of investment in Mexico for the benefit of the three of us. So what is your opinion about it?
Sure. I'll start. Mr. Ambassador, first of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for coming to Cleveland. As a Republican, I'm embarrassed by some of the statements that have been made by Mr. Trump. I'll be honest. And they do not represent the positions of most Republicans. And most Republicans and most Americans value tremendously the special relationship with Mexico. I remember when many of our presidents, Republicans and Democrats, their first foreign trip was always across the border to Mexico, and that should continue to be the case. I am hopeful that there will be a change in the rhetoric and the public discourse in this campaign. Mexico should not be an issue. Mexico is a very important, not just business partner, but historically a country which we share a lot more than just a border. And that's how I feel. And I can tell you that among Republicans, that is valued, and that is the prevalent position of most Republicans, I would say. Having said that, however, there's something going on, not just in America. It's in Western Europe as well, as we see it. We can talk about it for hours, of course, and I'd love to do it one day with you, of course. But a lot of people feel left out by globalization. The working classes, not just in America, but in Western Europe, feel left out. And we see it expressed in Brexit. We see it in Spain, where it was a strong two-party system, and now they have 4 weak parties. We see it with 5 stars in Italy, UKIP in the UK. We see it in France with Marine Le Pen. We see it in the Dutch electoral process. So there's something going on, and I think it behooves us, the Western democracies, including Mexico, to try to address those concerns and make what we have today work better for everyone, because obviously we're leaving some people behind, and we should not leave anyone behind. So we have to address it. I wish I had answers for that one. I think a lot more work has to be done about it.
The governor had said that should we all put our eggs in one basket on one party? Would that benefit the Latino community? No. The reason I mention that is because Hillary Clinton once said, I am adamantly against illegal immigrants. Look at them. They stand there in the street. Loads of people wanting jobs. We should not hire them. I think Latinos in the Democrat Party got to her and said, calmate, temper that. Don't do that anymore. And admonished her and held her accountable, which is why I think it's important that Latinos who are conservatives say, stop it, don't do that, and admonish and hold accountable Republican elected officials who are not sensitive to Latino culture and the Latino community. So I think we're part of the answer. We're part of the solution. Those of us who are conservative, those of us who care about these values and these principles, to say to somebody who has stepped out of line, watch it. Because there's consequences to what you say. Just like on the other side. And by the way, let me say, the relationship between Mexico and the U.S., we are interdependent. We need each other. Our people need each other. And we have to build those bridges and those relationships.
Okay. We have, how far can we go over?
11:30.
We're okay.
A couple of minutes.
We have 1, 2, 3, and 4 questions. And there's exactly 3 minutes. Short and to the point.
My remarks will be brief, I promise.
Hand her that microphone when she's done, and she's going to run over here to this young lady right here.
Of course, yeah. I'm Eric Estevez. I'm with the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators. I'm also a state representative from New Hampshire, and I'm currently running for the United States Congress. We talked a lot about the oppression of voters. I think there's an oppression of Latino candidates across this country. How can we work together as a team to ensure that Latino candidates are not discriminated against? Number one. And number two, how can we help Latino candidates like myself, who represent a state with less than a 5% Hispanic population, be successful? Because I think that if we really want to move forward as a Latino community, we need to help Latino candidates get elected so we're not underrepresented. So how can we work together as a team?
Well,
Why don't we get all the questions out?
Yes,
Okay.
let's do that.
And then we can...
The young lady.
de Raza Unida. In the year 2000, I was a proud delegate of George Bush. We ran the first Republican primary in 28 years, and he got 42% of the Hispanic vote, and that got it. Today, I am a very proud delegate for Donald Trump. And I know that we always ask the same question, how could you be a Republican in 2000? Now is, how can you be a Trump delegate? You know what? We're Hispanos, and we're not going to allow people to tell us how to think. In San Antonio, in Bexar County, we have a 91% winning rate with Republicans, and we got, the last one was in South San Antonio, the Barrio. Obama sent the battleground to the Democrats and them $8 million. Bexar County, we survived on $150,000. How do you win? You have to have the guts to go door to door, even if they slam the door in your face. But you know why they voted for John Lujan, who made history? They said, we don't like those Republicans, but I wanted to tell them off, but they had the guts to come and ask, and then I went and voted for him. So come on, the ganas. You have to go.
We can only have time for this last question. Sorry, everyone.
How you doing? Adrian Carrasquillo, BuzzFeed News. You guys push back against the narrative, which I hear on panels all the time, which is like only immigration, only immigration. It's upsetting when Latinos are only talked about only in an immigration context. But the elephant in the room has blonde hair, right? The national narrative that has been throughout the primary was disrespecting the Latino voter. And here's my question: the primary voters chose Trump. So when you're talking about educating as a Latino conservative, you have to educate, the other people in the party. Don't you also have to educate the base and talk about Latinos in the context that you're talking today, which is education and jobs and other issues? Because if the base only thinks of Latinos in the context of immigration, isn't that going to cause a problem? Paul Ryan and Jeff Flake have gone in this direction in recent stories, talking about after the election, regardless of what happens, we have to have a conversation about the direction of the party. And I was just curious about your thoughts on that.
Okay,
Well,
this is going to be like 15 seconds. Dale.
I'm worried just as much about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton when it comes to the issue of immigration. Donald Trump, because he's taken a harsh position, but at least he's a national negotiator. That's his starting point, and he'll move to the middle. Hillary Clinton is writing a check she cannot cash. She knows that she has a Republican House and a Republican Senate that is not going to give her everything she wants. So she tells Latinos, vote for me and I'll give you immigration reform. What she doesn't tell them is, vote for me, I'll give you immigration reform as long as I get everything I want. Well, you're not going to get everything you want. So we're not going to get immigration reform with Hillary Clinton.
Hillary, sorry, Ruth. Sorry, Ruth. Go ahead.
Not Hillary Clinton. I mean, I agree. I think there has to be an internal conversation as well. Like, the education doesn't stop, whether it be externally and talking to people more about the Hispanic community and the things that we care about. There's also a conversation that could be had within the party, and we'll surely benefit from that. But I agree with Dan and what he said about immigration. Is Hillary is over-promising and under-delivering, just what we saw with Barack Obama, because she's not going to get the House, at least, or the Senate.
Gobernador,
Sí. After
15 segundos.
After 8 years of Barack Obama, did we get special treatment? No. Did we get everything he promised? I rest my case.
Y le voy a dar la última palabra a don Arturo. You have the last word, sir.
Thank you, Lori. First, I'm going to pick up on his question before my final remarks. And I think what you laid out about not seeing enough support by both political parties, frankly, for Latino candidates was one of the reasons why NALEO was started, to support ourselves. I was so offended in California when Boxer declared she wasn't running for re-election, and there was a virtual coronation of Kamala Harris as a senatorial candidate with no deference to the fact that Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez was also interested in the race. So we can't have coronations by the Democrats, and those in the Republican Party need to be supported by themselves as well. But ultimately, I think this is where personal responsibility comes in, where we, as political animals, we have to support our candidates. And that's the one place where we don't do it as a community. We don't open up our wallets to support the men and women of our community who are making the personal sacrifice to run for office. And until we put our money where our mouth is, we're not going to have the kind of representation that we deserve in this country, because we have to do more than just vote. We have to invest in our community and our candidates. And with that, let me just thank the governor, Ruth, and Danielle, and you, Lori, for this conversation.
Thank you all for coming, and to my friends in the media, Fernando, hold on, because I know you guys are going to kill me. Don't shoot the messenger. The message is we have to clear this room. All interviews need to be done outside, and they gladly will stay, but we need to depart quickly. We got to do everything outside.
Cuídate. Encantado de ver. Ah, bueno. Ok, muy bien.